What if the people and organizations who are claiming to fight climate change are actually just manipulating the climate? That'd be a huge shocker, wouldn't it? How does mmWave technology relate to weather modification, and who is spraying our skies, and how can we stop it? In this episode, I'm joined by former Nevada City, California Mayor Reinette Senum to discuss all of this and so much more. We discuss the history of weather manipulation, the different forms of geoengineering and weather modification, how to read the weather when and how jet exhaust cirrus clouds are made, who is spraying our skies, how to test your own rainwater or snow, what Save Our Skies, Reinette's new initiative, is working on, and how we can put an end to geoengineering. You can learn more about Reinette's initiatives and Save Our Skies by heading to saveourskies.org or by clicking the link in the show notes. Also, don't forget to join us April 5th through the 8th for Confluence. Confluence is a one-of-a-kind gathering on a regenerative ranch amongst health and freedom community that includes lectures, workshops, regeneratively grown organic food, music, dancing, camping, glamping, bonfires, and so much more. You can get tickets at confluenceevent.com or just by heading to the show notes, and be sure to enter code ZEC10 at checkout for 10% off your ticket. Enjoy this episode with Reinette Senum. Listen to the language of the last 3.5 years. Lockdowns, travel restrictions, stay-at-home orders. This rhetoric, written by government agencies and corporate media, speaks to a clear intention, a concerted effort to keep us in place. Fortunately for us, a real grassroots movement, powered by real men and women, can never be stopped. Because mankind will always find the way forward. And this is where it all starts. With the Way Forward's new membership platform, you can connect with like-minded community and like-minded businesses near you by simply typing in your zip or postal code and setting a radius. We also have a marketplace featuring the best holistic health brands and products with deals you won't find anywhere else. And the best part is, you pay whatever you want to be a part of it. The Way Forward starts with a growing community coming together to share ideas, form local groups, and conduct business with like-minded men and women. Because if we're constantly being told what to do by so-called authorities, it's easy to feel helpless. But it's essential to know that we're not. Each of us has the power, and that power amplifies when we come together. There are many more health-conscious and sovereign-minded men and women than we realize, and this is where we all meet. Visit thewayforward.com to join virtually, connect locally, and pay whatever you want to be a part of it. This is the Way Forward. Okay, so let's start first by you giving your background. Actually, I don't think I've interviewed you on this podcast, so let's start there.
Okay. So I was raised in and am still in Nevada County, California, and that's in the Sierra foothills of Northern California. And I currently am living in Nevada City in Northern California, and I'm a two-time council member, two-time vice mayor, two-time mayor. And about 20 years ago, after doing a lot of real extreme adventures like crossing Alaska by myself and mountain climbing and traveling the world and really lots of extreme stuff and training with South Pole expeditions, I ultimately studied film for 8 years in Los Angeles, returned back here to my hometown and home area in 2004. And got involved actually through peak oil, of all things, of our oil addiction, and got really involved in the environment then, and really realized that no matter whether peak oil is real or not, man-made or engineered or not, the best thing we can do is get off our addiction of oil and really diversify. And it's all about local. And so I started really working on creating our local organic farmers market and a warming shelter for the homeless in the winter, and a sustainability center and a time bank and all these different things just to build our local resiliency. And of course, at the same time, I was watching the United Nations usurp a lot of our language, like sustainability and then resiliency, and people started conflating the UN agenda, right, the 2021-2030 agenda, with local resiliency. And I'm like, no, 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 we're the mom and pop local version. We're not the United Nations version, very different. And so when I ran for city council in 2008, because I was watching a lot of decisions being made, it was just basically rubber stamping. And I started asking the question, where are we going? Like in 20 years, where do we want to be? And I decided to run for city council, got elected, became vice mayor the first year, mayor the second year. And it was 4 years of just incredible creativity and projects and programs. It was actually really a highlight in my life. And then I stepped off the council, thought I was done. Still highly engaged though, and really working on a local town square and really showing like, okay, this is what a sense of place can be like. This is the potential of our community. And then I decided 4 years of a break, I decided to run back, run for city council again, which I did in 2016. And by 2016, Alec, the world had already changed. And the reason why I wanted to run was because I started seeing a lot of outside encroachment and risks and things coming at us. And I was like, I want somebody on the council that has like a backbone and is willing to make a stand, because I could see, and I trust my intuition. I've tested and bet my life on it many times. So I ran, but by 2016 through 2020, it was just putting out fires left and right. We like Pacific Gas and Electric would turn off our power for days at a time. If a wind, arrived like in the summertime during, high fire season. We had Paradise burn only 60 miles from us, and we were in the same kind of geography. So the fire danger was huge. 5G cell towers were coming in as well. We were fighting against those. And then when I was mayor in 2020, COVID hit. And I started becoming aware of COVID actually in January. It caught my radar. It caught my attention. And N1, H1, SARS, none of that stuff was I ever worried about. But I started seeing what was going on in China in January. And I started going to our county and city saying, hey, guys, there's this thing called coronavirus, and I think we should really pay attention. And so by the time our county and cities and the governor started to react to it, at that time, I was actually supportive of the 2-week stay-at-home orders, because here I'm the mayor, don't really know what's going on. Is it real? Is it biowarfare? Is it imagination? Is it, what is it? Is it as dangerous as they say it is? And as contagious as they say it is? And so I supported that, right, for just the 2 weeks. Well, of course, it continued and it continued. And what happened, though, was I began to see behind the scenes, because all of our public meetings, like the meetings I was chairing at city council, were all now on Zoom calls. And every Friday we'd have a call with our CEO of the county, the public health director, the managers of the cities and the mayors and so on. And it was a good idea. So we can like get all the latest information, be on the same page, make sure we're giving this the correct and the same information. But what happened was I started to see that we were being controlled in a very different way. Like we couldn't ask questions. If I raised my hand more than 2 times, I would be told, like, Reinette, you're asking too many questions. Wait till the end of the meeting when everyone's gone. And then, of course, they jump on me and dogpile me and tell me how wrong I was, or they just mute me, or they would ignore me, and I couldn't bring up questions. And I started to see very clearly by the spring of 2020, the only way out of this, in their opinion, was through some massive vaccination program, when the vaccines didn't even exist yet. So I'd just been reelected for my 3rd term during this time. And it was now June, and Governor Newsom did a statewide mandate. And I started getting absolute bombarded with phone calls of people freaking out, saying I was raped when I was a child, or molested, or as a woman, my mouth had been muffled, I have PTSD, or I have heart conditions or asthma, and people were freaking out. And this is when my town really turned on me, because I was speaking up for the voiceless. I was speaking up for the few. And I was saying, look at you guys, nobody has unilateral power to go out there and force and mandate a medical device in everyone's face. And so I was waiting for this pushback from our leaders against Newsom, saying, hey, you can't do this. And it was complete silence. 40 million people in California, and it was complete silence. So I went down to the police station, to our local, police chief. And I said, hey, Chad, I said, do you intend on actually enforcing this mask mandate? He says, I don't know how. It doesn't come with a penal code. I can't enforce something without a penal code. And it doesn't look very constitutional to me. I'm like, thank you very much. So I went home, grabbed a Peggy Hall video that shows you clearly how legislation and how bills are passed, what the process is. And I said, thank you very much. And I put a very bold post out there, because I knew it was going to grab some attention. And I was trying to get attention, saying, hey, guys, this is not legal. It's completely unconstitutional, and you don't have to do it. So I put a post out there with Peggy's video, saying as you go about your day, you don't have to wear a mask. Essentially Newsom is not king, does not have unilateral power to do this. And all hell broke out. All hell broke out.
Yeah.
LA Times, SF Gate, Sacramento Bee. It just, and my
Tore you
community,
apart.
what was that?
Tore you apart.
Tore me apart. And they're basically saying, I was saying, telling people not to wear masks. I'm not saying don't wear a mask. I'm just saying one individual does not have the power to tell you enforce a mask on your face. That's what I'm saying. The governor does not have this authority. And then the town considered me like the devil incarnate at that point in time. They're like, you, Reinette, of all people, we thought you cared about us. We thought you loved us. I was 20 years of dedication to this town and 2,000 volunteer hours a year. I was seriously engaged in this town and invested in this town, and they just saw it as a betrayal, essentially. And I'm like, look at you guys, you can't do this. And so I have people saying, well, if somebody doesn't want to go shopping with a mask on, they could stay at the curb. I'm like, okay. Would you say that to a Black person? Would you say that to an Indigenous person? Transgender, would that be okay? You can have curbside. Would you do? Why all of a sudden, when somebody has, wants their bodily autonomy and they want to make their own decision, why are they now a second-rate citizen? And so we have not yet recovered, Alec. We haven't recovered.
Have any of the people who were slandering you and ostracizing you come around now 4 years later?
I just last week had a neighbor who was like, we'd have cocktail parties regularly on our front porch. We'd go back and forth, or just kitty corner. They wouldn't, for the last almost 4 years, they won't even look at my house.
Wow.
Right. I actually watched them with their basket on Saturdays, walking towards the farmer's market, the organic farmer's market that I started. And they won't even look at my house. And I'm like, okay, that's fine. I know who my friends are now. Wow. And so the gentleman, though, of this couple, just last week, I was out doing some work on the yard, and he says, he goes, yeah, he goes, when you get a chance, because I'd love to talk with you. And I just looked at him, I said, yeah, let's do that. So in my stance is this, is like, I don't hate anybody. I know this has been psychological warfare and disinformation warfare. I'm very clear on that. And we are a community that we have the largest environmental film festival in the world, right? We are highly engaged, highly active, the most nonprofits in the nation, right, as far as per capita. And we are activists. We know how to go down to Sacramento and lobby and change legislation and push for things. And we have always been a very powerful little town. And we know how to do stuff and get things done. And when I did not go along with the community group think of put your mask on and don't ask questions, it was seen as such a betrayal. And people have not essentially recovered from that. But I understand how they got duped. It's like, well, if we need to do something for the larger good, we are going to do it. Yeah. And I didn't go along with it this time. So that was the first break. I had one person apologize to me about a year and a half ago on Facebook saying, I'm so sorry. I said all these things. I realized you were correct. Thank you so much. And I've had, just as I said last week, one person say, I'd love to talk with you. I'm like, let's talk. And so my stance is this: I'm not going to pretend we're friends anymore, because that's been broken. The trust has been broken. I'm highly disappointed. I'm hurt. But if you want to sit down with me and you want to have a conversation and we just talk openly, I'm game. And we can start a new friendship from there. And that's it. But I don't go around smiling at people. I'll nod, hello, hi. But it's not that, no, it's like, no. I'm not sure who you are anymore. And you don't seem to know who I am. And at some point, we're going to have a conversation to be able to jumpstart this relationship again, if there is going to ever be a relationship again. It's been extraordinarily catastrophic.
Yeah. Gosh, that's tough. Luckily, from my understanding, there's a lot of like-minded people in the town that you live in, though.
Well, it's not in the town so much. Nevada City is tiny, 3,100, it's like a big old.
On the outskirts of Nevada City, then?
Much more diverse. And we were, private, what do you call it? Private membership associations. We were really starting that in the United States. PMA, we have what's called a Renegade Ranch, where they actually opened up a little tiny sliver of an organic grocery store. And you were forbidden to have a mask on, right? And that was just to prove the point. If you had a mask on, we're like, you can't come in here with that mask on.
Yeah.
And then the county showed up and said, we're going to close you down, blah, blah, blah. We're like, well, first of all, we're a PMA, A, B, you come back here, we're going to personally hold you liable and we're going to sue you for $2 million, And then we had restaurants that were just standing their ground. And all the restaurants we used to go to, like the organic restaurants, they folded, they required masks, vaccinations. It was the organic farmers were requiring vaccinations of their staff.
Oh, that is so absurd.
It was just, everything was upside down. And now the restaurants we would never go to because they were like the more conservative Lion's Den, we're now going there regularly because they're the ones who stood their ground. And it's just like, wow. And it hasn't switched back. It's still that way. So I ultimately, Alec, what my hope for all of us is that we do a truth and reconciliation in Nevada County. That we actually bring in a facilitator and we're going to sit people down and we're going to hear each other's stories. We're going to once again work towards the common ground. That's the stuff I used to do when I was as elected official. I used to do that kind of stuff. I was very good at that stuff. But we're not there yet, and we might be. But we have to see what Disease X does, right? Because when they try to start Disease X, they might just that might all just flare up again and people go back into fear and they get hysterical. I don't know. So I'm kind of waiting to see how that plays out. And hopefully we're going to get ahead of this so they don't release Disease X and try their little scheme because we're already calling them out ahead of time. So I'm kind of
ironically, that might play into exactly what we're going to be talking about during this episode too, because my position, as you already know, is that there's no proof of any of that nonsense and it's all fear-mongering tactic. And with the possibility of creating sort of this clustering effect, given God knows what that they're spraying and manipulating the weather with, I think that's a perfect segue into discussing this. So before we get into the legal fund that you launched in April of 2023, I want to talk about what piqued your interest to go down this road of geoengineering and weather manipulation. I remember I had a phone call with you 8 months ago or something like that, where you were just so pissed off at how you don't see bees anymore and you don't see lightning bugs at night. And you're like, what the hell's going on?
Well, we don't have lightning bugs here, but it's what we've seen is in the last few years, especially, is just the disappearance of a variety of bees. They've just, like in my front yard 6 years ago, I had a huge variety of mason bees and Russian bees and fairy bees and honeybees and bumblebees. And now it's just, some honeybees, but just that variety and the level of diversity and numbers just plummeted. And then just bugs in general, moths and butterflies and so on. And spiders, it's just the numbers aren't there. And then the wildlife, right, has also been greatly reduced. So what happened was last winter here in California, we were bombarded with snow, extraordinarily heavy snow. And in the Sierras, we call it Sierra cement, our snow, because it's just so full of moisture anyway, naturally. But this stuff was so bad, and the trees are dying so quickly, and they're just so brittle, and we can explain that later, that ponderosa trees that were built for snow loads were snapping in half, were falling over. Limbs were just dropping. I mean, old mother oak trees, gorgeous 100 to 150-year-old trees were just breaking and splitting in half. And it was carnage. It looked like a hurricane came through. Power was out for weeks. And it's not just power, it's communication, your cell phone, your well, you don't have power for your well. There's no water. And it was just like trees and trees and trees. And so they actually brought in fire crews for the first time ever in the wintertime to cut through to get to people because they're unreachable. People could not make it to their woodsheds. They couldn't get to the wood. There's so much snow.
My goodness.
Carports were collapsing. Roofs were collapsing. I mean, trees were collapsing. And so a tree fell, it hit the side of my house. And then 4 days later at my partner's house, we're sleeping, the snow had passed, the storm had passed, and all of a sudden we hear that iconic sound that's all too familiar, where you hear this loud cracking, something big is falling through the forest, and that's when you hold your breath and you wait for the gigantic thump. But what happened was instead, which is like, it felt like a train had just gone through our house, and this huge oak tree that was 100 feet away hit a tree that hit a tree that hit my partners. And it ends up that the two huge branches straddled our bed upstairs.
Oh, goodness.
And we got, $50,000 later, insurance, luckily, we got it all fixed. But what happened was the trees are dying from the inside out. And so we've actually been collecting bark samples. We have people who've already tested bark, and they're extraordinarily high in aluminum and heavy metals. And so what's happening is that these heavy metals and this aluminum is being absorbed into the channels of the trees, and it's just clogging the channels and it's killing the roots. So what's happening is you'll see these trees fall over and you look 6 feet down in the root system and it's just decayed. It's just
Wow.
disintegrated.
And
The
that's
whole
because, as we know, trees pull water up from their roots
sugars,
through
minerals,
the
water,
trees.
it goes up and it's killing off the roots. It's going up and it's actually blocking the channels. So in most conifer forests, when you go into a beautiful forest, the ponderosas and so on, you'll go into the forest and you'll get that beautiful scent, right? Just hits you. It's like, oh my gosh, you barely smell the forest anymore. You don't smell them because they're not breathing in that moisture, the water, and they're not expelling it. So they're not breathing. So you walk into a forest these days, Alec, you barely smell it.
Yeah, crazy.
They're
So
dying from the inside out.
were you aware of all this before 2020? Like,
Yeah.
at
So
what
what
point?
happened was
Yeah.
I was raised here, and I had some very scary experiences around cell towers. And by the way, I had the first cellular phone store in Nevada County, in probably Northern California, in 1990. I was
Oh
selling
my God.
bags. So I'm actually an early adopter. I'm always on the kind of front end of things, and I was excited for the low orbiting satellites that were on their way and this and that. I thought as a mountain climber and adventurer, it'd be great to have a phone. If I break my leg, I can just call for help. And I thought it was a great thing. And then I started seeing red signs, red flags, actually, when I was even owning the store at the time. And so then when I started to fight cell towers and learn more about it, and actually had Verizon come in here, which I have to do a story on my Substack, they actually came in here in 2016 when I got reelected, and they tried through a post about police brutality on my Facebook. They tried to use that to gang up on me and have the community turn on me and actually force me into resignation, 36 hours of being back on the city council.
Whoa.
Afterwards, we found out because Verizon was coming in to put 8 cell towers in our historic downtown Nevada City. And I actually ultimately did not leave the council. I did not resign. It was a witch hunt like you cannot believe. It's just shocking, this experience. I stayed on the council and I actually sent Verizon packing because they had what was called a gap in service. They did not prove a gap in service, and they cannot put antennas out there unless it was a gap, it was a loophole. Well, long story short, it was right afterwards. A dear friend of mine who was an advisor, she's like a global advisor around this and very well known. She said, Reinette, she goes, yeah, they're gone. They're not doing this, but why don't you just send me the radio frequency compliance document? We'll just look at the engineering specs, see if there's anything unusual. And she calls me, and I actually I just rediscovered the voice recording that she left just a couple of weeks ago. I thought I lost it. And she calls me the day before Thanksgiving. She says, Reinette, I've been looking at these RF compliance documents for years. I've even done it for the World Trade, building and so on. I've looked at hundreds of them. I've never seen anything like this. Generally, a cell antenna is 2,000 to 4,000 watts. These antennas are 15,600 watts. Generally, a cell antenna it's like this, or it has like a 2-degree down tilt. That'd be, kind of extreme. 4-degree would really be extreme. What they had for those antennas was a 6-degree down tilt. She goes, unheard of. And I said, what does that mean? Basically, what that means, Reinette, was they're going to have the main power beam, instead of going over the horizon, right, for as much distance as possible, they're going to use that, and 200 feet around the whole entire downtown center, Nevada City, they're going to have the main power beam hooking everybody on the street, hitting all the people in the second story and all of the homes around, because we're in a hilly area. She goes, I've never seen anything like this.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, were they weaponized? She's like, I'm not going to say anything, but in my decades of experience, I've never seen anything like this. And when that happened, I was hell-bent by that time. Alec, I was down in the capital, Sacramento, which I'd been before anyway, but I returned. I started protesting against this stuff. We tried to do a telecom ordinance to fight and stop 5G from coming in, because I'm like, if you're doing this with 4G, I can imagine what you're doing with 5G. And we tried to do a telecom ordinance, and man, did they ever bring the big bucks and the big guys in to fight against that and water it down. And I became hell-bent, and this town doesn't know that story yet. This is the first time I've actually gone public with it.
Wow.
And I will actually be
And
doing.
what year was this again?
When was this?
Yeah, what year was this?
2016.
Wow. Wow.
And then that was it. So that happened in 2016, and then I discovered in 2017 that essentially Verizon was coming in and weaponizing the towers to cook this town.
Oh my God.
Got all the evidence. I've got the documentation and the agenda package. I've got the original recording, the voice recording that our consultant who said, Reinette, I can't believe I've never seen anything like this. And so what was interesting is that when I was mayor and COVID hit, and we have our stay-at-home orders, I'm like, this is kind of scary because, like, what are they doing in the middle of the night? So I would get myself up in my little pajamas and I walk out at midnight or 2 or 4 or 3 or whatever. And I drive around my town. I drive around my county, just looking around and see what's going on. And sure enough, Alec, between 3 and 5:30 every single morning, I began to see an army of utility trucks coming in, going out and then expanding from pole to pole, those big, thick, huge cables, which are basically the backbone to 5G. I would see them expand it, and then just leave it hanging like these big old huge cords, like just, round up, coiled up. And they come back the next night and do it for 2.5 hours in the deepest, darkest part of the night. So I call a woman named Daphna Talkover, who is working, she's an attorney, originally from Israel, working for the Children's Health Defense in California for their 5G department when they had it. And I said, Daphna, they're putting out the backbone in the middle of the night of broadband for 5G, essentially. And I'm like, she goes, Reinette, it's happening across the whole entire country. We were watching them put them into schools, saying they're HVAC systems. Come to find out later on, when I'm interviewing people like you are right now, I'd be talking to people in Israel or Ireland or Europe. Everyone came out of the stay-at-home orders and there were cell towers everywhere.
Yeah. It's crazy. My wife and I just recorded a podcast yesterday that will come out just after this episode, where we talked about the same thing during the initial parts of the whole charade of 2020, just seeing them shoot up everywhere.
Well, okay, a couple things. One is there's a public process, right? You have to have public comment, you have to have EIRs, there's all these different things that's required by law. What happened to that? That's the first thing. The second thing is, I know as an elected official, this was a global program that was instigated and launched as soon as the whole world was forced into stay-at-home orders. This tells me it is a significant piece of the COVID plan.
Mm.
So I'm saying to people, when this disease X starts, to be launched, you need to go look at your towers. You need to look at your 5G modems. You need to actually remove as much 5G in your life as possible and protect yourself, especially in your home. Get rid of those 5G phones. They're weapons. They're military grade, millimeter wave. Not only is it military grade, but there's a Hebrew study from 2007. I wrote about this in 2017 called 5G, What You Don't Know May Kill You. And it's basically, it's proof, and it's been proven over and over again in other studies, that our skin and the sweat ducts and the sweat in our skin actually has been turned into antennas essentially, that can actually go out there and send and receive information. So when you're around 5G, your whole entire skin is turned into an antenna. That's without graphene oxide, by the way.
Yeah, that's crazy. Well, you bring up a really good point. There's this lady, I think her name's Sabrina Wallace, and she
Oh yeah,
talked.
I love her.
Okay, yeah. I'll
Yeah,
just link that in the show notes, because that I don't want to go down that rabbit hole.
yeah.
That would but it relates to exactly what you're saying, that they were she postulates they were able to induce the symptoms that we know as COVID, which again is a catch-all for so many things because the misuse of the PCR tool, all the stuff we already know. But nonetheless, she says that there's already an ability to use our own biology in concert with some of these technologies, specifically millimeter wave technologies, and specifically with our biofield, the electromagnetic field that
Right,
surrounds our body,
right.
to essentially induce symptoms of illness as they want with these different frequencies and technologies.
100%. It's the Internet of Things. So the other thing that, in fact, it was Gillette that started this. God, how long ago now? Over 10 years ago, way over 10 years ago. They started putting these like little sensors in their products, and then everyone else started doing the same thing. And that was actually in preparation for the Internet of Things. So we're talking children's toys, cars, construction stuff, tools, you name it, they all have sensors in them. And so the objective is they triangulate everything. So even if you're here in your own home, and we know, of course, they now have them in the LED street lamps, which is really, really bad. You could be on the toilet and they know how many, pieces of toilet paper you're using. They know what kind of salad dressing you're putting on your salad. You are literally being triangulated, and you are part of this Internet of Things, whether you want to be or not. And so companies are putting in these sensors, these RFID chips, essentially, before they even fully knew what the potential was. They just knew they needed to do it before people figured out what was going on. And so this has been, we are being biohacked, and it's relatively easy to do. We are bioelectric beings. And I say to people, like, look at, guys, it's not a matter of if it's affecting you. It's like, how is it affecting you? And that depends upon your age and your epigenetics and your health and what you're eating and your exposure in your own home. I mean, like right now,
Mindfulness state.
Ethernet. Right.
State of mind, state of connection to God.
Right. And also I regularly, when I see dark stuff, anything, or I get a bad feeling, I just say, I do not consent. I'm watching, Davos and the World Economic Forum and everything they're doing. I'm just watching them. I'm like, no, I do not consent. I do not consent. I just say that spiritually, like, no, we know what you're doing and you don't have our permission, period. And so I believe there are universal laws. And while Sabrina talks about we have been hacked, I don't disagree with her, but I'm like, you're right. But we are connected to the Creator. And as much as these beings are going to try to hack us, nothing can outdo the almighty Creator. And when we align with the Creator and we connect with the Creator and we say, so there are these universal laws, which is like, oh, we're going to biohack you. Yeah, but you don't have my consent. And once I know about it, that's when I say no. And they have to.
Can I comment on that real quick?
Sure.
Because this is so cool. So a really good friend of mine, Chris Crutchfield, who's a brilliant guy. We've had multiple conversations on Sabrina Wallace's stuff. And what you just said is literally the exact same thing that I said to him and that we both agreed on, is that, yeah, all that is likely happening, but we are able to overcome it by energetically letting them know that we do not consent to this stuff. We
100%
consent.
That's right.
That's exactly what I said. It's so cool that you in California are coming to the same conclusion as I am, and we're on the same path. And
it's probably in the morphogenetic field, and it's and I know I think people are catching on, right? This is a spiritual war, and if it's a spiritual war, then I'm going to come at it spiritually.
Amen.
Right, creatively, and I'm and I am a child of God or the Creator, and I'm like and I know these are some very dark forces. I mean, I've been nailed, I've been targeted electronically, I've been targeted physically, I've got evidence in my own bed. I mean, I've been nailed many times, and but I'm still here. And in fact, I think the dark entities out there, in fact, we don't even call them evil because it gives them too much credit for intelligence. We call them, instead of evildoers, we call them stupid doers. And so I think that they are probably a bit shocked that we're still even around, right? And I think that's what we've seen manifest at the Davos summit, is they're like, oh my gosh, we're gonna have to control their memes. We're gonna have to control their narrative and their storytelling and their communications because we're not winning. And I'm like, yeah, you're not winning because we are part of the divine Creator, and you can't trump it. Sorry, you can't trump it. And the more that we realize that, and these things feed on fear. So I call
them the parasitic class. I don't even call them the elite anymore. They're the parasitic class.
They're, in fact, my whole image is of a big parasite. And I'm like, and they thrive off of fear. And I've done enough ayahuasca to know that when you have some dark demonic thing coming at you, you laugh, and then it goes, and it runs away. And it's not used to that. It's like it wants to, ooga booga ooga, like scare you, and you run away, and it's a facade. So it's like, you guys don't have power over me. And I tell people, like, well, how do we counter this? I'm like, well, first of all, you have to be non-dependent upon the system that's trying to enslave you.
Amen.
If you need EBT cards, you're screwed. If your job is you're on the government tip, you're screwed. It's all about local food, local medicine, local energy production. People are like, well, we need the energy grid. I'm like, yeah, you do. But what you need to do is start, really investing in research and development with Nikola Tesla, free energy. That's decentralized, and decentralized again. The best thing you can do is be decentralized and go local, grow your own food, everything you need to do, and you're golden. But if you're dependent upon that system that's trying to enslave you, you're going to have some tough struggles ahead. I think it's really important to say to people is that it's really important to be in joy and to laugh a lot. Like, also laugh at these parasites. And one of the things my partner Susan and I did, and this was on her encouragement, is when the lockdowns happened, immediately we started having regular Monday night dinners with like-minded people that most of them are new to us, new friends. And we're still doing that essentially to this day, Monday night dinners. And we were doing that at full on lockdown, leaving our phones at home so we couldn't be tracked by our county because we knew they were doing that kind of stuff. And being in joy and communing. And so we also we did what's like a SWOT analysis, which we used to do at the city council, which is your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So we look at each other like, what's your skill set? What do you have? Do you have a generator, a fire truck? Do you know how to grow foods, herbs? Are you what can you do? What can't you do? What are the elements, the things we're missing? What do we need? Okay, communication, this, that. So
did you find that you had everything you needed around you amongst your community?
Never. You never will. But we have a lot. I mean, we're good. We're
trending in the right direction though.
Oh yeah, I mean, we're good. And the thing is this, that I say to people, like, if you think that you need to do it all alone, you're never going to do it. That just it's never worked that way. Even the old homesteading days, you never did.
No, I meant that. Did you find that within your community, just amongst the people, you had what you needed?
Pretty much. I mean, I think one of the biggest weaknesses is communication. Like we have satellite, we have VHF, like two-way radios. We even have our own channels so we can communicate with each other. But if there is, let's say, an EMP, and I don't think there'll be an EMP because that will just destroy all this infrastructure and assets.
That destroys their infrastructure too. That's the thing.
Right. And I think it'll be more like just turn off the power, just cut it off. That's all you need. That does plenty. So when it comes in, but even that, like our two-way radio will only last for a couple of weeks because the guy who has the towers, he's got a generator that'll last 2 weeks max, with fuel. So the communication's kind of to me, one of the weaker links. But we do have look at if power goes down, communication goes down. By the next day, 12 o'clock, this is the house, the place we all meet, hell or high water. And so we have that kind of stuff in place. But it's like you don't have to have all the skills and everything. It's like you just bring your people, you circle the wagon, and it pretty much fills itself out for the most part. Yes.
So let's go back now to you discovering the harms of this telecommunications technology. They started installing these towers at a weird angle because it wasn't broadcasting to the horizon, it was broadcasting more downward
on the ground.
Right. And you started understanding that it was impacting our biology, impacting nature. And at what point did that then tie into what's happened in April, where you started this legal fund for geoengineering? And how do these towers specifically tie into geoengineering? And then we have a whole we have a whole list of things that we could discuss within that.
So when COVID hit, I was already fighting against the expansion of towers anyway. I already kind of learned enough, especially after the Verizon occurrence. And geoengineering, I used to sell as a child, always looked at my skies, never saw these trails going on forever and expanding and so on.
Which is so crazy because Gen Xers and boomers, I literally just said this morning on Twitter. It is mind-boggling to me that there are people who are Gen Xers and boomers who did grow up, and even people like me who are millennials who definitely grew up with mostly clear skies, that now look up at the skies right now and say, yep, that's totally normal. They're just condensation trails.
Well, we'll get into it. It's shocking. It's shocking. But so I started seeing that, and we used to have all these beautiful, beautiful skies, and then they're just crisscross. And then sometimes in the summer we wouldn't see the sun for weeks. It's insane. So when COVID hit, I got COVID centric because that was on our front door. Yeah. Then once we started kind of getting out of it, I'm like, okay, it's all of a sudden, in this last year or so, it's gotten even worse. I'm like, what the hell? So I jumped back on the geoengineering, and then with the winter that we had, and what seemed like a weaponized winter, 60 feet of snow, the snow was so full of moisture, it was breaking things, it was cracking and crashing things and splitting things. It was like it was weaponized. And I have to tell you, what's so sad, and this makes me cry more than anything, is that our wildlife didn't survive that.
Wow, man.
When you go up even a little bit further, even here, the rabbits have not returned. The foxes are gone. Haven't seen the raccoons. I go further up and I talk to people who are living out in the woods. They're like, Reinette, the bears didn't make it. They died. Wow. The deer didn't come back. There's no squirrels. And people, when you say that to them, they'll go, oh yeah, I haven't seen many squirrels. We have not had acorns in 2 years. The oak trees aren't producing acorns. And so it's just like, you guys, this is, look at this, the geoengineering that's going on, and my mind has been having to wrap around what it is and what it is not. And a lot of the assumptions that I thought and believed have not proven to be true thus far. My
Mm.
mind might change again tomorrow, according to the information I'm getting, but it's like, okay, it's not exactly what I thought, but it's still bad. And this is the most important thing, because you might be trying to save the salmon or the redwoods or the children. But the problem is, if we're all being sprayed like bugs, you're not saving anything. This
Mm.
is like, all hands on deck. So after that winter, I was so livid, and I was so ticked off that nothing was still really happening. And I was looking towards people who have put themselves as the face as geoengineering. I won't mention names. And I was under the belief, like most of us, that these certain individuals and these certain organizations are out there, they're in the courts, they're battling, they're fighting, they've got it covered. I come to find out that's not the case.
Yeah.
There's nobody doing anything.
Mm.
And so I'm like, that's it. I'm done. I don't know exactly what I'm going to do, but we're gonna start somewhere and we're gonna fight this. So what I did was I contacted a woman named Dina Pollard Sachs, who I met through COVID, and she's a constitutional attorney. And I said, Dina, I want to come through this through the constitutionality lens, and look like, how can this be constitutional? How can we be sprayed like bugs from our sky? How's this even possible?
Mm.
So she did not even know what geoengineering was. She didn't know what chemtrails were. She's like, what are you talking about? I had to explain
Wow.
it to her. And then she'd point up, with her phone, and she'd like photograph something and send me like, is this what you're talking about? And then she actually would finally see it. I'm like, yes. And so what happened was, during that winter, I had a bunch of mama bear friends I had met through COVID, and they had gone out and taken hail samples and water samples, and we got the results back. And of course, they were extraordinarily high in aluminum, strontium, barium, cadmium, cobalt, lead, copper. It's like, what's that doing in our rainwater? What's that doing in our hail samples? So, but we already knew that, we saw that, but when you see it in your own rainwater, it's just like, it gets real really fast. And so that's when I'm like, that's it, I'm done. So I decided to go on to Give, Send, Go, because I knew they were very supportive of the truckers up in Canada, and not use Kickstarter or anything like that, because I didn't want to be closed down. And so I went on to Give, Send, Go, and I was on April 18th, 2023. I'm like, look at, guys, this is the Stop US Geoengineering Legal Fund. I'm going to put together a bunch of legal ease, researchers and attorneys and people who are passionate like I am, and we're gonna carve out a path here, and we're gonna bring somebody to court. But I know how corrupted the courts are. So the objective was not just to go pursue the court avenue, but also teach people how to do their own research, how to take a different direction, use notice of liabilities,
Right.
how Washington's doing
That's what
that.
I was just about to bring up, is NPower. I had interviewed Cal a few months ago, and I know he has one piece of that is targeted towards geoengineering.
Yes. And
Yeah.
so he's got a great team. I just talked to him about a week and a half ago,
I
and
saw that on your Substack.
yeah, so like by mid-February, they plan on having a notice of liability for geoengineering. And so the objective is to have a multi-pronged approach, and that's what we're trying to teach people to do. So the objective is to say to people, like, look, this is so huge. You can't expect a small team of us volunteers, essentially, except for a couple of the attorneys who are working at greatly reduced price. You can't expect us to do this, because this is gigantic. It's huge. It's multi layers. It's highly complicated. It's also very, there's like, it's also very under the covers, right? There's all these covert things happening, and we have now been educating ourselves in such a way to identify who the perpetrators are, what to expect by when. And now every second Tuesday and fourth Wednesday of the month, we have a Save Our Skies Swarm webinar, where we bring on Catherine Sari, who's been doing all this amazing on the ground work. We have a meteorologist by the name of Jeff Matiska, who is actually from the Air Force, teaching us how to read the skies. Jim Lee from Climate Viewer, giving us this plethora of information to help us actually formulate a clear idea of what's really going on and what's not going on. And I have to say, I've been shocked by some of the stuff that I've learned.
I bet,
And
I bet we're going to
so
get into some
we're going
interesting
to get into
stuff
that.
during. Can
So,
I make a quick point real quick?
sure.
Um, what I love about you is you understand both the metaphysical and the physical steps that are required in order to say I do not consent, because you already got the metaphysical basis covered of I do not consent, but it also requires that we take physical action in this reality to show them we do not consent, and in some cases hold them liable or try to put them on notice. Um, and I think that's a huge, huge, huge piece that's missing for a lot of people, especially in the more quote consciousness community. If you're enjoying this episode, please consider sharing it with at least one friend or family member who you think could benefit from hearing it. You help us grow and reach more people by sharing it with those around you. Also, be sure to head to the show notes to check out our membership offerings, membership marketplace, and more. We all know that big ag is poisoning our food supply, and big pharma's so-called medicine is straight up poison. What most people aren't aware of, though, is that most supplements are also filled with artificial sweeteners, dyes, GMOs, glyphosate, and a host of other toxic ingredients, even many of the more natural supplements. My good buddy James Benefico dedicated his life to crafting the world's cleanest, most nutritious organic supplements after a pre-workout energy drink caused heart palpitations so severe that he almost landed up in the ER. Organic Muscle was born, revolutionizing sports nutrition by using exclusively non-GMO ingredients from USDA organic farms. Since then, tens of thousands of people, including myself, have leveled up their fitness and their health with Organic Muscle's award-winning natural pre-workout. There's no jitters, no heart palpitations, no itchy skin, just nourishing organic food and herb-based ingredients for clean, sustained energy, strength, endurance, and recovery. Numerous studies have shown that Tonka Ali is the most effective herb in the world for naturally boosting testosterone levels. And we know that testosterone levels are depleting all over the world because of what's put in the food supply, what we're exposed to. Organic Muscle has the world's first fully organic Tonka Ali supplement. I only support and promote things that I actually use, and I can say I legitimately use Organic Muscle products. Use code FORWARD15 at checkout for 15% off at organicmuscle.com. So many of us dream of buying some land, growing our own food, and becoming self-sufficient away from a society that's gone completely mad. What if it's easier than we think to make that dream a reality? Siblings Jamie and Shelby over at Living the Off-Grid Dream have cracked the code to getting land and living a life of freedom. They'll show you where to find land for $1 down. That's right, $1 down, with low monthly payments, as well as how to structure your vision for a homestead, retreat center, regenerative farm, or community. It's one thing to have food, water, and land security, but it's an entirely different thing to have the financial security to buy the land and build it out in a way that aligns with your goals and aspirations. Their program teaches you how to make enough money on your land to cover all of your costs to make that happen. Plus, they've got you covered with pre-filled out plans to give you inspiration if you're not quite sure what your best move for your land is. And if you're a member of The Way Forward, you get a free one-on-one strategy call with Jamie and Shelby, as well as a free bonus gift. If you want to turn your homesteading, off-grid, or retreat center dreams into a reality, join Living the Off-Grid Dream by clicking the link in the show notes or heading to thewayforward.com/off-grid.
Yeah, I do have a lot of people saying I'm just going to think good thoughts. I don't want to get involved, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, that's not the reality we're in.
No.
It's not the reality we're in. And I said, if just praying and meditating and wishing and envisioning worked, then why didn't it work for the Native Americans?
Right.
Why didn't it work for the Buddhist monks?
Right.
I mean, it's like we're in this dual reality, right?
Requires both.
It requires both, and it's not an either or here. And so that has been our approach. And it's also not just fighting in courts, because we know how corrupted the courts can be. This is a multi-pronged approach. This is all hands on deck. And so our objective is to teach people how to be, how to be sky watchers, how to read the skies, to actually know what's going on over their heads, how to test, how to report, how to go out there and through different modalities, take down the perpetrators.
Let's start with this then. Let's start with establishing what geoengineering is, establishing various aspects of weather manipulation, and then move into the how and how we can affect change individually and collectively. So let's start with the history of weather manipulation and when it really began.
Well, interesting. When you ask people, when do you think weather manipulation started? They're like, 1960s, 1950s, I'm like, actually, according to Jim Lee on his climateviewer.com, which is also weathermodificationhistory.com, he has the best, most robust information out there on the history of weather modification. And believe it or not, it started in like the mid to late 1800s with fires. With fires, they used fires to bring in weather. So that's when they actually started to manipulate the weather.
I think they also used fires to erase history. When I look at things like Chicago and the Chicago fires and everything that was going on at the World's
Oh
Fairs.
yeah, with the World Fairs. Fires,
Yeah.
huge, right? So yeah, all the Great Fire of Seattle, the Great Fire of San
Yeah.
Francisco, the Great Fire of right, and so on. Yeah, so they've been.
Sorry, I didn't want to go off on a tangent there, but I had
But I'm right there with you. The fire is great for all that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
So they started there, but then what they started to do is in the turn of the century, in the 1920s, 1910s, and so on, they started using silver iodide, and they'd shoot it off, into canisters. They shoot it up into the sky, and they basically create this ice nucleation, and they would be able to get the water to accumulate in rain. Well, believe it or not, back in the 50s and the 60s and so on, even in the 40s, they were flooding out ranches and farmers, and there were lawsuits where they actually lost, for their weather modification. And so it started a long, long time ago. And then in World War I, they really started to use a lot of weather modification. And then the first time was in the Vietnam War with Ho Chi Minh Trail. They actually use weather modification as a weapon, and they actually prolonged the monsoon season and made it extraordinarily intense to literally just rain out and wash out the supply lines, which was also very hard on our servicemen and women as well. So that was the first time they actually use it. And since then, there's something called the mmod. It's a global treaty, essentially, that you cannot use weather modification during a time of war. Well, you can use it during a time of peace, and you can also use it against your own people in your own country, but you can't use it,
Yeah.
Right. It's kind of ridiculous. So
Yeah.
so there's that. Now, let's see. So what's been happening now for many, many decades, and people and for a long time they were talking about, weather modification using sulfur dioxide and silver iodide and potassium iodide and dry ice and stuff like that. And so they're talking about it. And then, a decade or two ago, they started saying, oh, no, that's not even happening. That's a conspiracy. Well, now it's just kind of common, like, oh, yeah, we do cloud seeding all the time. We've been doing that forever. And so what people don't realize, it was back in 71 or 72, sorry, that the U.S. Congress said basically they're going to require that weather modification programs have to be reported annually. Like whenever you're going to go out there, you have to do an initial report. And then every quarter, you've got to say what it is you're spraying, how many thousands, hundreds of thousands of square miles, and who's doing it for what end. And so if you go on to NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, you go on there in conjunction with the Department of Commerce, you will see there's this weather modification report. And you'll see going back years and years and years ago, these reports to date. Now, the reports are not like we have to verify, we have to vet, we have to do an environmental impact, report. None of that. It's just like, just tell us where you're spraying and what your intention is. And so when people say that this stuff is not happening, it's actually reported to the government quarterly, like all the time. You can go on there right now online and see it for yourself. So please don't tell me this is not going on. But there is this misunderstanding that we've been doing weather modification for years, and it's harmless and there's no problem. Well, first of all, the stuff they're using is accumulative. A. B. They're basing their research on its safety from 1990 reports and studies. Nothing modern have they looked at whatsoever. There is no one watching the hen house, not even the foxes around to watch the hen house, right? You just go in, you report, they say, yes, thank you very much for letting us know what you do. And they can even say, we're spraying this, we're spraying that, and proprietary compounds. And you don't have to, it could be mRNA vaccinations, for God's sake. Mm-hmm. It could be nanotechnology. We have no way to know. That's not part of the report whatsoever. There's no environmental impact report whatsoever. So
it's really just on us chemically analyzing soil and water and snow deposits and things like this in order to try to piece together what they're spraying.
Right. So it's I have to say it's highly, highly complicated. And I'm going to probably say some things where people are going to say, whoa, wait, no way, you're wrong, Reinette. And let me tell you, my mind, again, I've had a couple of existential meltdowns because I'm like, wait, that's not what I believe. So let me start here. One of the things that Jim Lee from climateviewer.com, and he has a photographic memory. This man can retain and remember things like you cannot believe. And he comes on to our Tuesday, second Tuesdays and fourth Wednesdays of the night of the month. And he'll come on there and you'll see how brilliant this guy is, right? So if anybody wants a question, go ahead and question away. So I have a group of extraordinary people. We call them our Skywatcher teams. And again, we are students as much as we are teachers, right? We learn, we test, we challenge, we apply, and then we try to share with people as we learn ourselves. So one of the things that Jim's been really, really battling is saying, look at guys, when you see those, like I've been witnessing for years and you have too, when you see those look like contrails, but now they go on and on and on and they spread and spread and spread, he goes, those are not the chemtrails that you're thinking. They're actually cirrus clouds being made by commercial aircraft. And what we have come to find out, because Jeff Batiska, who is a meteorologist, used to work for the Air Force. And his job was to go out there. And what he would do is he would look at this thing called the Appelman chart. The Appelman chart is a chart that shows you, the whole entire, all the different levels of the stratosphere and the troposphere and so on. But it shows you the humidity level and the temperature. And his job on these aircraft carriers were to actually figure out where you had this little tiny band where the military aircraft could fly without creating what looks like a chemtrail, like a long, extensive chemtrail. Because if this thing is this military plane is flying out there and flying back onto the aircraft carrier, it doesn't want a little white trail leading all the way back to where the ship is. Mm-hmm. So Jeff came along quite a few months ago. We have what's called California Chemtrails on Telegram, started by Catherine Sari, who's one of our Mama Warriors Skywatchers. And he came on and he started saying, hey, look at guys, you've got this wrong. These are actually, this, if you look at the Appelman chart, I can tell you tomorrow at 3 o'clock to 8 o'clock, you're going to see what looks like chemtrails in the sky. So he went on there and he started pissing people off. You're a troll, you're a mole, get off of here, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, whoa, you guys, listen, you've got to just let all your beliefs go and you've got to be open, okay? Because this is highly complicated. And we can't go in there with these solidified opinions and
preconceived notions.
So I started saying, hey, if you can read this Appelman chart and when we're going to see these extended contrails, that look like chemtrails to me, tell us when. And he's like, okay, tomorrow from 11 to 5. Nope, nothing the next day, probably nothing the next day, but and he started nailing it.
Wow.
Okay. So he also went out onto a tarmac and got Jet A fuel. There's different kind of jet fuels, right? Because we wanted to get it tested. So we sent that off. He drove it down to the lab in the Bay Area. We got it tested and it came back with no heavy metals. And we're like, what? So we're talking to Jim, like, Jim, where's the heavy metals? He's like, well, first of all, you have to understand that they're not doing the right kind of tests. The kind of tests we need to break it down into the microscopic level is not even available to us. In fact, the labs that we need to really break it down to see, like almost like a subatomic particle level, they're in Europe. And when we contacted them in France, like, we don't want your stuff. We're not going to test your stuff. We're not interested. So we know that even within these fuels could be nanoparticulate matter that we have no way to test. The military probably does. The government probably does. Those labs aren't available to us. So they can be spraying anything out there. So what we do know is that they don't, these heavy metals are in there, but the labs that are available to us cannot test for them. And there's other jet fuels too. There's other jet fuel A that has, additives like stuff to stop, static electricity and to stop from freezing and stuff. And we don't know what's in there. So there's still this area in our research is a gigantic, huge question mark, right? We're like, we just can't get to the bottom. So when you see what looks like chemtrails to us, and you're looking, oh, damn it, they're spraying today. They're not spraying. Whether you see those extenuated trails or not, every single day, that jet fuel, that burnt jet fuel essentially is being sprayed on you, whether you see it or not. However, we do know there are heavy metals, the aluminum, the strontium, the barium, all we know it's coming out of the air, it's falling out of the air. So where's it coming from? So there's a gentleman who's actually one of our advisors. His name is Dr. Marvin Herndon, and he wrote, Chemtrails Are Not Contrails in the Face of Evil. And he's saying, look at guys, when you see the commercial aircraft going back and forth, that is essentially, that's jet exhaust. right? And not that there can't be some kind of technology in there that we don't know about, but he goes, it's not what you think it is. What he is saying is, and this is what Jim Lee has been pointing out, is the guy named David Keith. He is the one who's been really pushing geoengineering to reduce, the sun, right, to the solar, so on, for climate change, which by the way, I started nonprofits around to fight climate change, is a big scam, big
Well, of
boondoggle.
course, because now you're probably under the realization, as a lot of us are coming to realize, is that climate change is being proliferated by those who say they are fighting climate
100%,
change.
100%, 100%. So it's smoke and mirrors. Okay, so let's try to keep this as clear as possible. So what Dr. Marvin Herndon wrote this book on was, and Jim agrees with this, is that as far as they have these power stations, right? They have these smokestacks where they're burning coal. Well, they're required by law to use these big scrubbers as a system where they actually remove all of the heavy toxic metals, right? It's called coal fly ash. So they have all this coal fly ash, which is just horrific. I mean, it's just as toxic and as deadly to everything, from the microbiome into the soil, to aquatic life, to human life, to the unborn, to humans, to, the insects. It's toxic. And they have no way to get rid of it. But David Keith is like, but you know what? He has a calculation, which Jim Lee has shown, and this is staggering. All it requires to change the weather and to modify the weather and to dim the sun is no more than 14 essentially jumbled jets spraying out what they scrub out of the power so those power plants that they scrub out all the coal fly ash. They scrub that out, and now there's 14 planes across America who are spewing that left and right. And what that does is those little tiny particulate matter it creates these little ice nuclides that dim the sun. So the objectives, this trails that we see left and right is the commercial aircraft. That actually does block the sun too, because they're creating cirrus clouds is what they're doing. They're creating cirrus clouds. They are dimming the sun. We're not getting the vitamin D. We're not getting the photosynthesis of their plants. We're not getting the energy from the solar and so on. It's not good for us. It's not for growing food. We are actually, the commercial aircraft is altering the weather for sure. Mm-hmm. But where those heavy metals are coming from, and then more than just this one direction, is from the power plants. They're spraying this stuff, and all it takes is 14 big planes a day flying around the country to spread out and to spread out and to spread out. Their objective is to do this, is not to create the cirrus clouds. They don't want to do that. It's almost too obvious. Their objective is to make sure that when you look up at the sky, it's relatively blue, but when you look down over the horizon, it's that milky white color. That is what they're trying to do, is to create that. That is their solar dimming programs.
Wow. Okay,
there's another thing. In January 2022, there's a volcano in the southern hemisphere called Hunga Tonga, and it blew up. It was so powerful that it actually blew up 12 miles, and it blew up into the stratosphere, right? So down here we have the troposphere, and that's pretty much where all the aircraft is flying and so on. And then the stratosphere is kind of more untouchable. This thing blew up into the stratosphere, which is unheard of. And it pushed a gigantic amount of moisture into the stratosphere that was down in the southern hemisphere until about a year ago. And it started moving up here. So guess what? In the last year, you are now seeing more what looks like chemtrails than ever, because there's more moisture in the stratosphere and coming down into also, the troposphere. So there's more moisture in the atmosphere. It was down there in the southern hemisphere for the year, and now slowly made its way up. So you, for the next year or so, are going to see more lines now than ever, because there's so much moisture content up above us. Nobody ever talks about that. So there's that. Now there's another big thing, and that is that when NAFTA began and we started to ship all of our raw materials to China to make products and then ship them back over, it just exploded the shipping industry, the cargo ship industry. And there are now these, they're huge. When you see them, they're gigantic. These ships, these cargo ships, they're like floating cities. And they have these huge bunker the smokestacks, and they use what's called bunker fuel. And so these smokestacks using bunker fuel is the nastiest, dirtiest fuel out there, like not cleaned up at all. And now they're using biofuels like chicken fat and, and like green waste. But the problem with green waste is it has glyphosates, right? And they're burning these things at high temperatures. And so you can actually see what's called ship tracks. You can Google it, ship tracks, and you'll see these like white little lines like this, and they kind of move because the ships are moving and the white little trails behind them from the smokestacks are being moved around. And they're actually creating this white film over the ocean, and they're also changing the weather out there too. Those things are also full of heavy metals, and God only knows what else. So that stuff is blowing over from the Pacific Ocean over to the West Coast. It actually builds up along the Sierra, foothills and the Sierra Mountains. So if you actually test the rainwater, let's say in the Bay Area versus along the Sierra Slope where I am, you're going to have a much higher concentration here because the stuff just comes there, goes up, hits the mountains, and then it rains or it snows down. And we're getting nailed. And you can see that because the trees are dying like crazy.
Wow.
Catherine Sari, who has been the mama warrior collecting all the samples and so on, was just in Colorado. They were there a year ago, and in a year's time, even her husband noticed it. The trees are dying like crazy. And they're like, what just happened? So she called me, she goes, Reinette, the trees just in 1 year's time, they're just dying. And she goes, well, I don't know what to do. I'm like, grab some bark and save our skies, our organizations. We're gonna pay for the test. Let's get it tested. I mean, we test bark, and you can see it's full of aluminum. So it's a multitude of different things happening. Now, when it comes back to, let's go back to talking about the weather modification, the cloud seeding. The cloud seeding has been going on for so long that people are like, you've been doing it forever. It's no big deal. It doesn't cause any harm. It's like, have you looked at the insect population? Have you looked at the bird population? Have you looked at the trees? This stuff is accumulative. And it's one thing you sit there, it's like it's sulfur dioxide, which is not good. It's silver iodide, it's potassium iodide. It's all these things. That's one thing. But then when you expose them to high heat, because they're using flares, you change the chemical compound. Then what is it doing? So people have just assumed that cloud seeding is safe. And what we're seeing is like, it probably is not. And we're pursuing that right now. So when it comes to the commercial flights, there's something else I have to say. Back 20 years ago, 30 years ago, like in the 1970s, you had like 70,000 flights a day, Now, at any given time, you have 100,000 flights at the same time. So commercial aircrafts, you're seeing more streaks now because there's just so many of the aircraft. They're out there. And now because of Hunga Tonga, our atmosphere has actually changed. We actually have a lot more moisture, and that's going to take a few years to work its way out. So you've got that. Then you've got the change in the cargo ships coming over, and that stuff is even far, far, far worse. And that's a beast because that stuff's coming from China. We don't even really know what's in their smokestacks. It's actually, to me, it's a national security issue, to be honest.
So really, real quick though, the argument that they are condensation trails is true to some degree because it's because of more moisture in the atmosphere. That's
right.
why you were seeing them more often.
Right. So, but what I was led to believe, and I'm sure you've been led to believe, is that if you don't see those trails that continue on and spread out throughout the sky until the sun is dimmed, that you've not been sprayed that day.
Yeah,
that's not true.
They're spraying every day, though.
Every day, some days you can see it, some days you can't, according to the Appleman chart.
So chemtrails are real; they're just not distinguishable from contrails. The white that you see really does depend on
the white is essentially a cirrus cloud. Again, not that there's not nanotechnology in there. It could be, right? And that's where we really need some big agencies and people to help us out. But the government's complicit in this. And I want to see if I can maybe show you. So the thing is that they are creating cirrus clouds. They are changing the weather. They're definitely manipulating it, right? They're blocking out and dimming the sun. And I wish I could. I don't know if you're going to be able to see this. Let me see. But
if not, you could take a picture of it and we can.
Okay, I'll take a picture. So basically,
bring it on screen.
Actually, you can see this. So right here, you can actually see this little tiny dark streak going across here. Right. And then you see the white streak. That white streak is commercial aircraft. This dark streak, coal fly ash.
Wow.
That's the coal fly ash. That's the difference. And when that stuff, and all they need is 14 planes a day. They've calculated it for it to spread out across the United States. And then when the moisture comes in, right, it leaches out into the rain droplets, the snow, and it falls on us.
So those would be considered chemtrails because it is literally
Yes.
spraying
That is those are the, and that's like looking for a needle in a haystack, by the way.
yeah.
So
I've seen them though. My dad and I have talked
oh
about
yeah.
that quite a bit. The
Well,
black
and
one.
those when
Yeah.
you see that happening, then like go inside, like
Yeah.
really, that's the dangerous stuff. So you might, because we have certain individuals out there who are saying, I won't say their names. I've not been very happy with them since we started this because they're not supportive. In fact, they tried to fight us doing what we're doing, which I think is really kind of creepy. But they're saying that when you see that commercial spraying, like go indoors, nothing you can do about it. It's like that information's flat out wrong. And whether you see those trails or not expand, you're getting sprayed jet fuel every day anyway.
Mm.
So, and again, don't know if the nanotechnology is there or not, but if you see it or you don't see it, doesn't matter. It's still happening every day because there's commercial aircraft happening, unless it's like 9/11 situation. So what we're doing right now, though, is our team of sky watchers, and we teach you this at our swarm webinar. And what we're going to be doing is, like you, I'll be going down to the Conscious Life Expo in LA at the LAX.
So excited to hang out with you there because that's
I
typically
know.
not my crowd. So it'll be fun to hang out with you at least.
Yeah, I can't wait. There's a few friends I have not seen for a while, and I'm excited too because that's kind of like my little deadline. It's forcing me to get the whole entire program together, which is great because our objective is to turn everyone into their own respective leader in their own location.
Great.
And so what we do in the Swarm webinar is that we teach you how to read the skies. And so we have Jeff who goes through the Appleman chart to explain it to you. We have Kat who shows you, and Jim can do it too. And actually, Jeff is very good at this. They use ABS tracking, Flight 24 radar. I also purchased a Sky Glass, which is what MonkeyWorks US uses, but it's a little bit more sophisticated and complicated. And what they've done is they've learned how to read the sky. They become familiar with the airplanes over their heads. They actually will go like, oh, that's the plane. And they'll go run in and they'll grab their phone. They're like, oh, there it is. I see it. And they track it. So there are certain signatures, and we can now see we've actually, God bless Jeff. He'll say, okay, you guys, starting at 3:00 today is when you're probably going to start seeing the cloud seeders. And more than likely, this will be the area they're going to hit. And the reason why they're cloud seeding is because the power companies like Pacific Gas and Electric, or Southern Edison, or the water agencies are wanting more rainwater for their hydroelectricity.
Wow.
So when you generally do see the cloud seeding happening, and they're like Cessnas, right, with these little flares generally, not the big planes, the small planes. And you will see there's a certain signature where you'll see them do these little kind of figure eights over and over and over again for several hours before a storm comes in. They're cloud seeding. Once that moisture, that band of moisture goes through, gets hit by the cloud seeding, you'll then see the cloud condense, right, and concentrate the moisture and you can actually see the cloud change once it passes through the cloud seeding. And many times this is happening on farmers and ranchers' land. They have canisters in the ground and they just shoot it up. They get paid for that. And let me tell you, they get paid handsomely.
Wow.
And then you'll see cloud seeding. So on the front end of the storms, and you'll see the cloud seeding on the back end of the storm where they might try to extend the storm and get more moisture out of it.
Wow.
Right.
Can I ask a question real quick related to HARP while it's on the top of my mind? And I guess just in general, frequency-based technologies as it relates to weather manipulation. And before I even began exploring this stuff several years ago, I remember seeing in the sky something that I do not ever remember seeing as a kid, where it looked like a pulsed frequency was shot through a series of clouds where there's like distinct lines in the sky separating clouds from each other. I'm like, that doesn't look natural. That doesn't look right. So,
Right.
how does that tie in? I know that's a very big question,
Heavy
but how does that
metals.
tie into this?
Heavy metals.
Yeah.
Like graphene oxide in the bottom, it's a heavy metal. So they can, it's in the air, it's floating around, and they just use that to
So they do shoot frequencies through it. That's what the
yeah.
hypothesis is, and
Oh,
then
yeah.
it causes these
Oh,
metals to then separate the
100%.
clouds in a certain way.
100%. And
Got
they're
it.
using that too. So are they using that in conjunction with the same programs? Like they're working together in tandem? Don't know. Are they just like, hey, here's all these heavy metals, let's use it to our advantage? I don't know. And that's where you get, into these more nefarious programs that are really, really, really hard to point out. So that's where we need a groundswell of people, of the public saying we're done, because they can say, sorry, it's national security, nothing you can do about it. And that's where it's like, look at it can't be a small group of us fighting this. We got to educate the public, teach them, and then they go to their local officials saying, hey, this is what's going on and it needs to stop. So we know the military has these dark op programs and God only knows what they're doing. And that's a whole other level. There is New Hampshire, in fact, right now going on in New Hampshire, there is a bill being read, which is the Clean Atmospheric Act. And there has been a group of people, this is what's called zerogeoengineering.com. Jolie, who's also wonderful. There's this group of women and some men, I'm sure, but women I've been working with and known for a few years who keep going out there and pushing this bill to be read and to be passed. And of course, it never passes, but they come back every year and they come back and they come back. And so what they're trying to do is do this Clean Atmospheric Act, where it's like you can't. It's radio frequencies, it's HARP, it's geoengineering, cloud seeding. Like you can't do this. And so people are like, well, it never passed. It's not. I'm like, look at guys. I go down and I fight bills all the time. And there's a game that's played. If you go out there and you push a bill and it doesn't get passed, you go back the next year and you introduce it, and then the next year until it gets introduced. The legislators do the same thing. Right? The corporations, the bad guys, they do the same thing, where we go out and we fight a stupid bill and it doesn't pass. Well, guess what? They come back the next year and they try to push it until they tire us and wear us down. Like 5 years later, like, wait, didn't we already fight this bill? Until it gets passed and they get their way. Well, we, the public, have to do the same thing. We have to advocate and do the same thing as well. So there's all these different layers. So, okay, we have legislative, getting bills passed. That's important. We have the court. That's where our team specifically is pursuing the court. And it looks like we're going to be starting with the actual cloud seeders, because a lot of assumptions been made around, oh, cloud seeding is perfectly safe. And we're like, hell no, it is not. And so we've got that. Then you have the teaching people to actually start reading the sky and the planes themselves, learning how to use Flight Tracker, taking the samples. We teach them, this is what you want to test for. Here's a certified lab you can go to. If you can find another one, it's good to have a variety of different labs, not just one. We have one, but it'd be great to find one if you're on the East Coast or the West Coast or wherever else. What to test for, right? How to identify the signature of a cloud seeding program, and to get familiar with, okay, what's cloud seeding, what's not, what planes are commercial, or are we seeing those jumbo jets up there and they're actually one of those 14 planes that is actually releasing the coal fly ash. So that's what we're trying to teach people. So what we're doing is we're funneling them into our Tuesday evening swarm webinars and our Wednesday swarm webinars, so they can come there, answer the questions, because we need an army of people to do this. And this is why it's so important. If we're not successful legislatively, if we're not successful through the courts, we're going to be successful by going out there and going after the guys who are doing the spraying. The guys who are flying the planes.
Yeah, putting them on notice, right?
Oh, yeah. This is where the notice of liability comes in. So I know as a former elected official, you are protected in your seat, your official capacity. You're protected until you commit a crime. And once you're part of a crime, you're allowing it to continue, or you're just turning a blind eye, you are now complicit. So the notice of liability, what Cal Washington and his group's been working on, it's a little different than smart meters or cell antennas and 5G. They're like, basically, once you spray us, you're kind of getting us involved in a contract, whether we know it or not, right? All of a sudden, you're spraying over our head, and if we don't say anything, we're just saying yes to it. So the objective is to each person in their respective location to learn where the weather modification programs are happening. Now, to let you know, most of the cloud seeding is happening from the Rockies towards the west, towards the Pacific, Ocean. That's because there's these layers, there's these atmospheric lifts of air and moisture, and
it makes sense because that's where weather travels towards the east anyway. So,
right. So what you see though too is that it's really from the Rockies on where the tree death is really, really bad. When you go to the East Coast, the trees are doing fairly good. They're not dying. That's because we're getting bombarded, not just by the cargo ships, but by the actual cloud seeding program. So
you raised a good point. My dad lives in the middle of the mountains in Colorado, and we visited him this September of 2023, And I made a comment to my wife as we were driving. I'm like, look at how many trees are gone. It almost looked like we know a lot of people there backcountry skiing, backcountry snowboard. It literally looked like they had cut lines on the mountainside over this pass called Monarch Pass. And I don't think they did. I think they probably went down, cut down all the dead trees, most
Yeah.
likely, especially because they're, of course, really ecologically friendly and they don't want to cut down trees unnecessarily. And it made no sense. And now it's starting to make sense.
Yeah. Well, you know what I recommend is have your dad get some tree bark, and we'll tell him where to send it, and we'll pay for it to get tested.
He listens to this, so I will.
Yeah, Dad, get some. If you see a dead tree, grab some tree bark and send it. And you know, you can get your contact from Alec, my contact from Alec, and we'll tell you where to send it for, and
Wow.
we'll pay for it. So what we're doing too is so Save Our Skies. We started this this Give Send Go Stop U.S. Geoengineering Legal Fund, and what we paid for before was legal researchers to actually do some deep diving, like where can we go? And there's like just a plethora of different directions to take this. As you can kind of see, and what I'm discussing is just the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah.
It's highly complicated and convoluted. And so we paid the legal researchers. Now what we're really paying for are the tests for the rain and hail and snow samples and bark. So we're testing for that. So if there are individuals out there and they jump on board with us and become a sky watcher and they start seeing where the cloud seeding is happening, if they take water samples, let us know. We'll pay for it. We'll pay the lab to cover your expenses. Because what happened was happened to collect rain samples last winter, and this it was like February, March. Just happened to collect it. And then afterwards, just a couple months ago, we found out there was a massive cloud seeding program that went on and caused millions and millions of dollars of damage. So this is the other thing we're discovering. There are agencies, counties, and cities who they just turn a blind eye. Maybe they're just oblivious, but some of them just turn a blind eye because when they have these catastrophic events, they make all this money in FEMA.
Wow.
That actually helps their bottom line. So why stop weather modification when it causes these catastrophic things? And yeah, you got to go out there, you got to get the FEMA money. It's an inconvenience, but in the end, cha-ching, cha-ching,
Getting
cha-ching,
paid.
they're getting paid not just for the construction, but for the admin.
Wow.
So they're not our friends, and we're seeing this. I can't tell you how we're seeing this play out, but we're seeing certain entities getting massive grants, tens and tens of millions of dollars to replace certain infrastructure. They don't. They pocket the money. Catastrophic weather modification happens because of cloud seeding. Their infrastructure gets washed away. They get all these FEMA funds, and it's like they're double dipping.
Wow. My goodness.
Yeah, it's huge.
Yeah.
Okay, so our objective is to get as many people out there. And this is the thing that's a doozy, is that it's one thing to say, oh, look at all this heavy metals in the snowpack in Mount Shasta or over there. But when you go and you collect your rain samples, you get it tested at the lab, you get the results, and then you go to your county supervisors and you say, do you see what's happening? Not only is this in your water, your soil, and your food, but these heavy metals are lodged in your brain. They are circulating in your blood. They are lodged in and this is the stuff that's going on. This is not over there. This is here. Kat did that with a county supervisor. She said, hey guys, do you see these rain samples? And one was like, wait, what? Because Kat had also gone to the air water quality boards, right? Go, hello, air quality board, aren't you? They're like, oh, we don't test for that. What do you mean? Like, oh, we don't test for, like, what do you mean? We don't even know. It's like, well, here it is. So when they ignored her, she went back to the county supervisor saying, hey guys, we're being rained on heavy metals. And let me tell you, there's a reason why our honeybees now have Alzheimer's.
Which is so crazy. Yeah. Especially relating back to the work of Christopher Exley, who you may or may not know, who's looked at Alzheimer's and the accumulation of heavy metals.
30-year-olds.
Yeah.
I have 20, 30-year-olds who are having serious memory loss.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I actually I see it. They're like, oh, they can't remember what we just talked about 10 minutes ago. They're repeating themselves.
Yeah.
So when you show that to them, it's one thing to sit there and go, it's happening over there. It's another thing when you show it's in your own backyard. Now, this is where it comes in. So then when you go to your leaders and say, I want you to look at this, there's a crime being committed. We're actually being sprayed to death. We're being poisoned. We're being toxified. And when they do nothing, whether it's air quality board or it's your county supervisor or city council member, right? Or it's the company that you've identified through the flight radar apps that you're like, oh, it's this, such and such
Which I
company.
want to talk about in a minute too, that
Right.
identifying the companies who are doing this, because
Right. So you go after them and say, okay, look at either you guys stop doing this. You don't have our consent. We know what you're doing. You're spraying us. We have it in. You don't have to show the harm. It's like you just can assume if there's almost all these heavy metals, it's going to do a number on us. Then what you do is you can go after them and say, we're going to sue you. We're going to personally for harm. Now, the other thing you can do, which was given to me just a few months ago, is maybe you can't go into, the courts, the bigger courts, but you can go and take these pilots and take these aircraft companies, and you one day go to your small claims and you go out there and you file a small claims, right, against the pilot and the company. And then your neighbor or maybe your geoengineering group goes the next day and the next day and the next. So every single day, there's somebody in small claims going after the pilot, going after the companies on a local level, saying, until you stop this, every single day, you're going to go in there and we're going to get you, which is much easier, small claims for $5,000, $10,000. We'll do it every single day and see how fast that stops them.
Hmm.
This is so it's a multi-pronged approach, Alec, because we cannot put all of our eggs in one basket.
Yeah.
It is highly complicated. It depends on your area, your respective area, like what's going on, and everything's collapsing around us. The trees are collapsing. The pollinator population is collapsing. The Alzheimer's is rising. People are getting more sick, more cancers, more everything. And then we have, of course, in addition, all the 5G millimeter wave that works and reacts with all these heavy metals.
I was just about to ask that if you'd thought about the use of not only just millimeter wave technology, but various frequencies and different types of non-native electromagnetic field technologies to sort of interact with what is likely being sprayed in our skies.
Well, 100%. So one of the things too that's going on, which is horrific, is that the military, which has been, we've had meteorologists, weather forecasters saying, you see this on the Doppler, that's military chaff. It's just blah, 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 like it's no big deal. Well, military chaff is aluminum coated fiber, like, fiberglass.
Wow.
So the military's out there and they're trying to cover up something with this military chaff. Like, oh, we don't want you to see below with your, whatever satellites or anything like that, or your radar. It's actually aluminum coated fiberglass.
Wow.
That we are breathing in and we're eating. And that has different consequences according to whether you're breathing it or eating it. Either way, it's not good. And so you have these meteorologists going, oh, here, look at this, and so on. So you have all these different layers, and we just kind of assume, oh, they're doing it, so therefore it's safe. None of that has ever been proven to be safe. Mm-hmm. And so what we're trying to do is just differentiate, like, where's the lowest hanging fruit where we can start and get our leg in the, our foot in the door and just start breaking this beast down. So, and there's something else I was going to point out before too. I can't remember, you were just mentioning that spurred my thought, but oh, come back to me. So to be honest, I'm actually kind of surprised we're still walking around.
Mm. Well, that just shows our resiliency, and again goes back to the metaphysical principles that are at play, that when we have deep connection to spirit and we are aware of this stuff without succumbing to fear, we can overcome it. Which again
100%.
does not necessarily mean that we should just sit back and be like, oh, whatever, just let it happen.
No, you don't, not at all. And the other thing is, like, the pollinators can't fight for themselves. Right? The hummingbirds, the wildlife, they can't fight for themselves. Yeah. I'm actually fighting more. Sometimes I get a little bit mad at humanity sometimes because we're kind of, lazy and entitled, and, they think like it's always somebody else's problem. So I do get a little frustrated, but I'm doing this for the little guys. I'm doing this for the ones that don't have the voices, and like the hummingbirds can't fight this. But I want to talk about the trees. So what's really interesting is even before 5G, there's lots of studies out there that pine trees, ponderosa pine trees in particular, their needles act as antenna.
Wow.
And that's why you're seeing the conifer, the ponderosa trees, the trees with needles get pummeled the most, is because they turn into natural standing antennas.
My goodness.
Yeah.
So that's why those trees are getting fried. Yeah. Well, have you also looked into how, I forget where I read this, trees that are around millimeter wave towers tend to produce more terpenes as a defense mechanism, which means they then become more flammable too.
100%. So you'll notice that Nikki Florio talks a lot about this. You'll notice that certain, you'll see your leaves that have a very, very glossy, very shiny, shouldn't be like that, right? That's the terpenes. It's just, it's
Mhm.
reacting.
It's responding to the toxic environment essentially.
100%.
Yeah.
And then of course that stuff is terpenes are highly flammable. So you just have this multiplier effect going on, right? And then you have the flammable aluminum, heavy metals, which is also incendiary. And so it's just this terrible, terrible feedback loop that's going on. So we're wondering why the forests are burning up so quickly and fires are starting. And granted, there's tons of arsonists out there, right? Trying to say it's climate change. And now we're seeing all these arsonists being nailed, right? And thrown, off into behind bars. And they're like, oh, it's climate change. It's climate change. And it's just really a lot of smoke and mirrors, a lot of smoke.
I think in some of the cases, like the fires in Greece, there was a lot of people sounding alarm on climate change. And then they came to find out that it was several people who did start
Canada
fires
too.
intentionally.
Yeah, Oregon, exact same thing.
And of course, I'd be remiss if I didn't bring up Maui and what happened there. I think that was directly related to weather modification intentionally.
Total directed energy,
Yeah.
100%. And and people sit and go, it's not real. It's like, what planet do you live on? It's not only is it real, it's used all the time. I mean,
Yeah.
you can think that little thing you have, your little beam that you can use. You could blind fly. Of course, it's very real. It's very easy. It's so easy to do. So, and there's something else I want to talk about fires. Let me think about this. Oh gosh, I can't think of it, but it'll come to me.
I know there's so many tangents we could go on with this. It's hard to nail it all down.
There is something.
Can I ask a question related to meteorologists, and maybe that this will jog your memory? So you have a meteorologist, Jeff, who works with you guys, and I'm sure, obviously, if he's working with you guys, he's on the same page. What does he say about other meteorologists who sort of turned a blind eye to? Are they turning a blind eye to this stuff? Are they aware of it? They just don't say anything. What's going on there?
Well, first of all, it's a combination of different things. Originally, we thought there was a meteorology gag order because we were told this, and it was something that one of these big geoengineering kind of faces was saying there's a gag order. Meteorologists can't, weather forecasters can't speak to when they see climate, geoengineering going on. And we were pursuing that as one of our legal routes. And then we come to find out that this meteorology gag order actually does not exist.
Mm.
This individual continues to tell us that we're not correct, but we've got an email from the attorneys who were working on the gag order doesn't exist. So there is no gag order on meteorologists, though this is a kind of a myth out there. Basically, it's a couple different things. One is they know what military chaff is. Most of them can't talk about it, otherwise they'll lose their job, A. B, they know about the Appleman chart. They know that all this stuff is actually made from the right amount of humidity and moisture in the atmosphere and the right amount of cold to create these extended, what look like chemtrails. Mm-hmm. So now, are there other dark nefarious programs going on? Yeah, absolutely. But those meteorologists are not going to be in the know.
Yeah. Again, they're like doctors, like scientists. They're just operating from the assumption that things like military chaff, as you're saying, or any of these other things that are happening are in our best interest. And another thing that I'd like to bring up is when people talk about how geoengineering is fake and it's a conspiracy theory, et cetera, et cetera. From my knowledge, every state government has a subsection of its website that is devoted to their geoengineering programs.
Oh, there's so many geoengineering programs that are on our websites and government websites and so on. And again, I go back to on NOAA, they're required by law since 1972 to actually report. They'll get in trouble if they don't report their weather modification programs, right? And those are the ones that are being reported. What are the ones that aren't being reported, for instance? So one of the things we're pursuing is Make Sunsets. Make Sunsets was banned in Mexico last year. And all what they say is actually weather modification programs that are just being studied and so on. And it's like there's no geoengineering or weather modification program out there that anybody, any meteorologist, anybody who can actually say, or geoengineer can actually say, we know exactly how this is going to end. Mm-hmm. Climate is so dynamic that nobody can actually make a clear prediction of what's going to happen. It's just, you can't do that. It's just too dynamic. So it's really a big, huge, fat game of Russian roulette, because you can still moisture here and create a deluge and a flood there and actually dry and create a drought over there. And so what we really need to do, and there are some movement out there for global treaties like no geoengineering whatsoever, because you might have geoengineering in America and it steals the moisture from Mexico or from another state that where the state doesn't do geoengineering, but it's being stolen. So it's gigantic. So it's complex. It's very complex. And what we're trying to do is just find where can we make our way in? Like, how can we find our way in here?
And another question I have real quick too is how can we figure out which companies are spraying in our area?
Well, it's pretty easy. A couple different things. One is you go on to NOAA. So if you just go NOAA, NOAA, weather modification programs, let's see, reports. In fact, I can even probably find it for you right here. If you do that, you'll see a whole list of just years and years and years of programs. So that's when you can actually find your area. Let's see here. So yes, if you go to NOAA, and you look up weather and climate collections, it's weather modification projects reports. And you just click on that and you'll actually see who is doing what and how many square miles and so on. There's that. Now, the other thing is that when you're using your, let's say, Flight Radar 24, you can sit there and you actually can click on to the airplane. And sometimes it's NA, like they are trying to hide some stuff, but for the most part, the smaller Cessnas, if it says NA, it doesn't give you a TEL number. It's usually like the CIA or the FBI or something like that, one of the agencies. But generally, the ones who are doing the weather modification, you can actually see what their TEL number is, and you can see where they land. And we've had like Catherine, she'll call up the little airports and say, hey, or the company, like, hey, what are you spraying? And they're like, what? Like, what are you like? What's in that stuff? They're like, who are you? She's like, well, I've been watching you. I saw you've been spraying all day. And they're just like, what?
Wow. And I'm assuming they're typically landing at small private
Yeah,
airports, of
100%.
course. Of
And
course,
and
yeah.
and those are companies, right? So maybe we can't go after the big guys, but we can start with the small guys, and you set the precedent, and you create awareness for people like, oh, this thing is real. And yeah, it might be small, but you do it over and over and over and over again for decades, and you're going to start killing things. You're going to be poisoning things. So, I hate to have to go after the little guy, but we have to start where we have to start. And, it's like the soldier, in whatever, during the Nazi regime saying, I was just taking orders. It's like, sorry, that doesn't stand
No.
any.
Mm-mm. So how
Doesn't.
can people get involved with what you're doing?
So the best thing to do is a couple different things. Go to saveourskies.org. And you'll scroll down. You can see donate here. If you hit the donate button, that will take you to our Give, Send, Go. We're still fundraising through that. Right now, that money is going into a lot of the testing and so on. That will help us a lot. And so you go to Save Our Skies. And the other thing is on that same landing page, you'll see if you happen to be in the LA area where you're going to be February 9th through the 12th, we're going to be doing the Conscious Life Expo, where I'll be doing a 90-minute workshop. And that 90-minute workshop, I'll kind of lay all this information out and then give you a lot more fine detail into how you can do what you need to do in your respective area.
Mm.
And we're really trying to build up an army of people and create a huge groundswell of support. Even our attorneys say, look, this is going to take a groundswell of public awareness, because if we go out there in a little silo and try to fight this in the court, they're just going to sweep us under the rug and disappear us. We want everyone to be aware of what's going on. So then if you go to saveourskies.org, you can also scroll down where you see our event is in LA. You'll also see it has information about the Swarm webinars. That second Tuesday, 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, and the fourth Wednesdays of every month, where we bring on Jim and Jeff and Kat and myself, and we just hold your hand, answer questions, get into more of the complexity and stuff like that. And really kind of teach you like how to do this yourself. And my objective by the Conscious Life Expo mid-February is to have this all laid out on Save Our Skies, so you just go there and see everything you need. And then if you need clarifying questions, you jump onto our Swarm webinar. And we're swarming like bees, right? One bee doesn't do it. Two bees don't do it. We're actually creating a swarm, a hive, a swarm. And our objective is actually just to come at them at so many angles, stinging them that they capitulate and they stop doing what they're doing.
Incredible. And it's so cool to see that you're aligning with Cal Washington and Empower. For those who are watching this that have not seen that episode, I don't remember the exact episode number, but I'll throw it in the show notes. It was quite an amazing episode. What Cal is doing is incredible. What you're doing is incredible. And it's so needed, especially coming to the understanding that we're learning to recognize our own power and our own ability to hold men and women of any title accountable for the things that they're doing. And um, I
Well,
think
and
this
I
is
think
another example.
the lesson for me, Alec, has also been is that for years, I mean, for many years, I was under the assumption that somebody was doing something. And now I've come to realize that person was not doing anything. They were just creating this illusion that something was being done in the courts and they had it covered and they were doing it. And I come to find out that's not the case at all.
I
And so,
think there's several people who are sort of promoting themselves as doing something really big as if they are in the courts and holding people accountable. Just wait, we're going to indict Fauci, things like this. And yeah,
right. And and that's by design
yeah,
and also to scare people into the fetal position because I'm like, I don't, as long as we're still standing, there's always hope.
yeah,
And what I've noticed is that when I'd hear these certain individuals talk about geoengineering, and I'm like, I'm pretty aware of it, right? Especially now more than ever. But I'll hear them talk. And even though I'm aware of what it really is, what's going on, or at least have a better handle, when I get done hearing them talk, I want to cut my throat.
yeah,
I want to go into the fetal position. And I think that that's part of it. It's like, it's hopeless. There's nothing you can do
yeah,
about it. It's too big. Game's over. You're done. No, that's actually not true. The fact that we're still here and still standing in spite of the odds speaks to, right, our creator and how extraordinary we really are. And
amen.
the big lesson for me is to not to wait for somebody out there to save us, right? We're always like, just trust the plan. The lesson here is you have to do it. Grassroots is everything. Local is everything. People are like, well, how do we stop the big ships from coming from China? You know what you do? You build up your industries. You buy local. You grow your food. You buy at local farmers markets. You don't buy the Chinese crap. You support local industries, and you be less dependent upon the shipping trade that is actually spraying us much worse than what's going on in the skies every day. And so, what's interesting, time and time and time again, whether it's about your health, about your food, about your medicine, about clean skies, is that over and over and over again, the answer is always local.
Amen. Amen. And it takes a local community of empowered individuals who recognize their own inherent power, their own connection to God to then take action and bring things back to the local level.
100%. And
Yeah.
we've let our power be usurped, and we've given it over to these criminals, and they're narcissists, they're psychopaths, and we now know that. We're seeing that very clearly. And again, disengage, go local, and don't be dependent upon the system, which is a global system that is killing us one way or another.
Amen. Reinette, thank you so much for joining me. This was awesome.
Yeah, my pleasure, Alec. I so appreciate you, and you're one of the big benefits to COVID.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, there were a lot, and it's connections like these that are definitely a huge piece of it. So, thank you so much for joining me. And for those watching or listening, please be sure to check the show notes for all that we mentioned during this episode.
bye, everyone.